it off. Randy will be our moderator. And thank you so much. Take it over.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. It looks like we've got a good group here. And I think this topic is something that we're all experiencing right now. And when we came up with this, we're like, we got to do something on this. It's so hot. And so we got, the way we thought of this, we got 3 great panelists. And I'll read their bios right before their section here. But I think we're going to organize this is we're going to, what we wanted to do, let me just say this. We wanted to kind of lead it off with what's going on macroeconomically, what's going on in the country. And so Steve Orr is going to kind of give us a big overview of the U.S. labor shortage, what's going on there. And then we wanted to have somebody that was in the people business of finding people, placing people, and human resources from an external perspective. And then John Luke Spittler is going to come in and talk about that. And he's got a little bit of presentation there. And then we wanted somebody that was in the manufacturing business that's dealing with it from an HR perspective. And that's Troy Skidmore, works for Encore Wire. And so Troy is going to tell us what Encore has been doing and the challenges they've had specific to the industry. And then so each person is going to have a section, they have a little presentation. I've got a couple questions. And then I think what we'll do is we'll give their presentation, then we'll come back to a panel kind of format. But in the meantime, I think if we can just ask questions, put them in the chat, I'll kind of monitor that, and we don't have to, we can wait to the end, or we can, if it's timely, we'll just hit them up with a question right off the bat. But they do have a presentation. So I think what we'll do is we'll start off with Steve, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to read Steve's bio. And then Steve, when Steve gets done, he'll pass it back to me, and then we'll deal with John, and then off to Troy. So let me just tell you a little bit about Steve. Steve is the Chief Investment Officer and Chief Compliance Officer of Private Wealth Advisors at Texas Capital Bank. He is responsible for the strategy, construction, and performance of client portfolios and trusts. He's over 30 years of portfolio management experience. He joined Texas Capital Bank from Communities Foundation of Texas, where he managed investments and helped to raise the foundation's performance to among the highest in the peer groups of universities and foundations. Prior to communities, he successfully ran insurance and arbitrage portfolios of Associates First Capital, totaling $4 billion, and insurance and bond mutual fund portfolios at Caterpillar Inc. He has a winning track records in every asset class which he has invested. I wish I could say that. And Steve earned his Bachelor of Arts in Economics and a minor in Math from the University of Texas at Austin, a Master in Business from Texas State, and a Juris Doctorate from St. Mary's School of Law. He's an attorney, CFA, and CMT charter holder. He serves on the Parkland Hospital Pension Investment Committee and the Dallas Jewish Community Foundation Investment Committee. So we got high power here. And Steve, if you want to kind of start your presentation and kind of tell us what's going on in the country, and what's going on with this macroeconomic labor shortage.
Well, thanks. Can everybody hear me?
Yep, sure can.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, Randy. Pleasure being with you all this afternoon. But in our few minutes together, I'm just going to try to paint a big picture background of the economy and labor trends. So let's just jump right in with GDP here. Let's see here. Just get on my slides. There we go. So I'm going to cover labor, inflation, supply chains, and a little bit on Texas. So as we think about the next couple of months in your mind, just remember your list: labor, inflation, supply chains, and Texas. So let's jump right in with GDP. Now that on the left side, that red line you see, that is potential GDP according to the Commerce Department. That's the long-term growth of the economy. And really for many decades, we're right along that line, sometimes a little above it, sometimes a little below. But you can see down there in the middle gray box, that 2009 right there, that was a great financial crisis. And you can see that blue line is actually what happened. And you can see how we fell there about 6% below what we were doing the year before. And what I really want to point out in this graph, and the whole reason it's here, coming out of 08, 09, it took us 9 years to recover back to trend. 9 years. Now, what about pandemic this last year? Walking in that January, February timeframe, look at us. We're just a little bit above trend. Things are going pretty well. Unemployment, 3.5%, almost a generational low. And then here comes the shutdowns, kaboom, 15% in April of 2020. We're 15% below year ago activity, worst ever, worse than the Great Depression, which was about 7% at its worst. And we came screaming back thanks to stimulus from the Fed, monetary stimulus. Congress amazingly reacted fairly quickly with fiscal stimulus, and that helped right the ship a little bit, get money in people's pockets, get things happening again. And then, of course, as we went into the summer, that sort of first wave of reopening, turning down the lockdowns, and we're coming back up. Now let's jump over here to the right and zoom in on this last year. And you can see, we're right about here. We've recovered almost all the activity. Actually, we're above pre-pandemic activity. So you can say we've recovered back to where we were. We're not quite back to long-term trend, but this is Moody's forecast, and Moody's and Wharton Economics and the rest of them, they're all about the same. They really think we're back on track here, first quarter of next year, middle of next year at the worst. And certainly with the nice rebound we have in earnings and everything else, we think we're on the right track. So what about the job situation, which is really why we're together today? Now, this is a little bit different way of looking at things. That nice burnt orange line from Austin, boy, down there at the bottom, just moving along just fine. That's job opening survey by the BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics. So the top line, that kind of, I don't know, what is that? Seafoam blue or something, magenta, whatever, turquoise, that is the actual number of unemployed. Now you hear about the unemployment rate in the news, but this is the actual number by the BLS counts. And so you come over here to the far right and you see suddenly in 2018, things are going so well. We actually have less unemployed than jobs available. That's the environment y'all are working in. Boom, here comes the shutdowns. And of course, unemployment spiked, and now it's coming back down. And we're at this juncture here on the far right that y'all are living with every day, that there's 10.4 million jobs, according to the BLS, open, but 7.6 million jobs unemployed. Now that gap, we know looking down the road, is a recipe for higher wages. That's the only way you're going to pull those lines together, or rent moratoriums ending, state assistance programs ending. Of course, the federal programs ended, the supplemental unemployment ended, but we think those numbers are worse than reported. Why? As we talk to our clients, we hear that some employers are even giving up on looking. They're just tired of dealing with it. Maybe y'all have experienced that too. So that, let's say that 10.4 million openings, hey, maybe it's 10.5, maybe it's 10.7. Now, on the other end, that 7.6 million unemployed, we think 1 million of those are gone. The boomers retired. We think another 1 million in this last year, their skills have eroded to the point where they probably don't have the skills necessary and they're in the wrong place. What economists call structural or frictional unemployment. So we think this is going to take a long time to get resolved, a couple of years at the least, but it will, just because we are a dynamic growing economy. And by the way, we're still growing, and I'll get to that in just a second. Now, let's talk about inflation running ahead of wages. You all heard about inflation, you've seen it, you're starting to remember it, some of us are. But the key here, those orange bars, that's consumer price index. Blue line, green line. Blue line is Atlanta Fed overall wage growth year by year. The green line, of course, is hourly workers. That's a 12-month moving average, so it's just starting to turn up. Despite the fact that it's turning up, CPI is still running ahead. We can get into that here in just a second. But what I want to point out is pricing power. When you have limited supply, or when people are holding themselves back, they get the pricing power. And we're seeing that manifested in a very unusual way this year. A number of these things that I didn't want to have come back in my life, but yet they are. It's 1970s. We have 176 walkouts or strikes this year, 17 alone in October. And the two biggest ones, of course, that are getting a lot of attention are the Deere walkout, John Deere, because farmers are flush with cash from some good harvests, even though we're having droughts in the West. In the Midwest, there's been some great harvests the last 2 years. Farmers are doing very well. They want to buy equipment, but it's not there. And more importantly, for some of us, the Kellogg's frosted flake plants, the 3 of them, they're all striking there. So if you were concerned about frosted flakes, you may want to make a stop on the way home. Now, let's zero in on this a little more in depth. Those burnt orange bars, you can see consumer price index the last few months, still high, 5.6%, but at least the rate of change is rolling over. And a lot of those, the gasoline stuff that's driving it, yes, it's still pulling it up there, but some of those other things in CPI, hotel costs, food, those things are starting to roll over. So that's nice. Now, what about that maroon College Station line that keeps going up there in the middle? That is producer prices. That's wholesale prices, zinc, tin, input, insulation for plastic pellets for wire insulation, certain grades of aluminum that get pulled into wire. All that stuff's still going up as far as we can see. And those increases aren't over yet. When you get inflation, regardless of where you're talking about, or we're gonna go to Spain in the 1300s, we're going to England in the 1600s, we're going to America after the Civil War. It doesn't matter where you're talking about, inflation starts with commodities. It started last summer or this earlier summer, and it rolls into consumers as folks have to pass these through because they're getting their margins squeezed. And we're starting to see that now. But what about this other 1970s retread we hear about? This stagflation, return of stagflation. I mean, this is something worse than disco, folks. Now, I would caution you to not listen to the stagflation talk, okay? And here's why. When you look at the reals, now remember, when you have a nominal number like GDP, like final sales, all these important numbers, they're nominal numbers. The bureaucrats are counting them up with their abacuses, and they're getting just straight numbers. And if you subtract CPI, consumer price inflation, from those nominal numbers, you get real. So when you hear an economist say, I'm keeping it real, he's not hip, we aren't, but he is saying, I'm just stripping out inflation. And so what I'm showing you here is real GDP, real final sales, real consumer spending. Final sales to domestic purchasers is about 95% of GDP. Real consumer spending, about 2/3 of GDP. So you put those here along with consumer credit, and anytime they get near 2%, you get a recession. Just look at those gray bars, and you can see when they dip below for any amount of time, few months at a whack, here comes a recession. Very good forecaster, very good forecaster. When you look to the far right, coming out of this last recession, are we anywhere near a recession? No, and we're not. The only line you see there that's anywhere close is that consumer credit. It's coming up from below, passing through 2% as consumers start to spend more, start to use their credit cards again, start to lever up a little bit. And the great news there is that coming out of the recovery race here over the virus, you've got stimulus, you've got supplemental programs, you got work from home. All those things add up to consumers are overall are in their best shape than they've been in a generation in terms of lower debt levels. Having those 3 big stimulus programs, New York Fed calculated that each of those 3 programs, only 1/3 of the money that was given overall out directly into consumers' wallets was spent. The other 1/3 was saved, and another 1/3 was used to pay down debt. Smart folks. So don't worry about stagflation, even though we got inflation in the news. Now we're starting to see some improvement in supply chains anecdotally. We have some clients who are very dependent on shipments from Vietnam and Malaysia, and things are starting to get unstuck. Some of them, in certain cases, they've had to go get the containers or open them up themselves in LA and get the stuff out. But those were summertime stories. They're not today's stories. And all the major indices, Baltic, freight boats that you see here, the Drury World Container Index, they're all peaking or starting to roll over. And that tells you that things are starting to happen more normally overseas. Of course, the logjam here is Port of LA, which is Longshoremen Union has a lot of power there, not working on Sundays, that sort of thing. but things are going the right direction finally. So let's turn to local news here. What's happening in Texas? Texas economic growth, it looks a whole lot like US GDP. You see that kink in 08 that we had. And then what's this flat line right here? Well, that is oil prices 2014, 2016. Oil and mining for oil, if you will, if they call it mining in the BLS series, that's still only about 20% of Texas economy. Back in the 90s, when we drove down to $9 a barrel in nominal oil, it was about 35% of the economy, but only 20% today. But my point here is that fall to oil prices, OPEC, it still does a song and dance on our GDP. And you can see that flat line there where we had almost no growth as a state for 2.5 years. Now, however, scarcity of fuel, especially natural gas, is helping our economy, and we should see that GDP perk back up. So looking ahead, Texas and real GDP, you can see on the left, coming back, we spiked those first 2 quarters of the year. This year, your 2 best quarters of your career, 7% average growth. The rest of this year, 3% in the third quarter, probably about 5% this quarter. Overall, it's going to be one of the best years of your career, if not the best ever. But as you can see in the middle of this, in the middle of the page here on this forecast, we're coming back down, but we're not coming back down to pre-pandemic 1.5% growth yet. That's several years away. We'll get there because of aging demographics and because of the huge debt overload we have at the national level. But next year, 4%, year after that, 2.5%, 3%, still above trend, still going to keep us having good, solid growth in earnings, S&P 500 and small cap indices both. And here at home in Texas, you can see that middle bar, that nice burnt orange again, Austin leading the way. First time ever you can say that about Austin as an area, as an MSA area leading the way in Texas. We already know they lead the way in traffic, but now they're leading the way in growth overall too. So where does that leave us? One good point here at the end is I want to take a minute to talk about demographics, and that is our pyramid does not look like the rest of the country. If you look at US has a noticeable bulge up there at that 75 to 80 range, and there's that boomer group up there. So and then in the middle here, it's a little less. And so we have the biggest part of our population, both sexes, is just now entering the workforce. And that's bullish for our labor market here. It's bullish for our GDP. So just to summarize, we're in reopening round 3 right now. We're headed back towards trend growth. Excuse me. And labor is the big question. How do we supply labor? How do we get those young folks the right skills and get into the workforce? Inflation is not transitory. It's going to be sticking with us for several years. Supply chains are improving, but hey, Texas is still the leader. This is still the place to be. We've got the advantage of migration, property taxes, and this transportation hubs with the airports and seaports. Randy, that's all I have.
That's great, Steve. A couple of questions that I was thinking about when you're giving your presentation. I mean, you think about this labor shortage we have, it's real for sure, and your slides show that. I mean, how much of that do you think is attributable to government programs? Is there, I mean, the unemployment checks have stopped, I think, but is there other government assistance that's stopping people from coming to work? And then kind of, is that more of an issue, or is it more the aging demographics that is causing the shortage? What's your kind of, in plain English, what do you think is the biggest problem?
Yeah, plain English, there is never just one driver, Randy. But we think right now the biggest driver is a number of states still have state supplemental programs that were funded through the CARES Act. And the states are slowly dispersing this money. And that's not the case here in Texas, but remember I was showing you national numbers, and the effect is keeping folks at home. Another driver that's I think very close, is just folks are afraid. There's a good slug of the population that just doesn't want to get out. And if they don't have the skills or the setup or whatever to work from home, then they're just not working.
I was listening to one of the business programs on, I can't remember what channel it was, but they were talking about the personal net worth of the populace. I'm not sure what statistic that's called, Steve, but that's higher these days. And does it mean that there's people just have the ability to stay home and not work because they've done well over the last few years or something?
We've heard some isolated cases of folks saying, I've got enough. I've got enough in my 401k, because they're looking at that balance, and that 401k has gone up, and maybe they got a little bit of their savings, and maybe they liquefy a little bit down. And so we've heard some stories here and there of folks just saying, hey, I've had enough. I'm not going to do this anymore. And the economy, in a sense, is bailing them out. The stock market's helping them in the meantime. But Randy, what we're seeing, the numbers we're looking at, is these folks are going to be able to find a job a year from now if they decide to do something else, and probably move somewhere else to do that. This is the third great migration, if you think about it. World War II was probably number 2, and number 1 was the Civil War. So the expansion of the West before that.
That's interesting. One question here came from John Casey. What is the possibility of stagflation? I think you addressed that a little bit, but you want to expand on that a little bit? Stagflation?
So, yeah, so we rank everything, or we try to, and kind of keep numbers on there just for our back pocket. The inflation, stagflation, and recession, it's a 3. So 3 means I worry about it from 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. So right now, in June, that was a 30% probability. We were staring Delta in the face. Of course, now we have Delta Plus with the 417 beta that may be vaccine resistant. That's surging the cases in the UK. But stagflation here in the US, we're down to 15%. So we think we feel it's pretty low probability.
Okay, great. Well, if you got more questions for Steve, let's hold those to the panel so we can get these other guys going. But stay there, Steve, of course. And let's go to John Luke, and I want to give his introduction real quick. He's appreciated being on the panel. Great experience. He's the chairman and CEO of the Encompass Group. That formed in 2002. The Encompass Group provides technology solutions for today's human capital management challenges and is an industry leader in the attraction and retention of top talent across a broad array of specialties. John Luke is responsible for the vision and direction of the organization, as well as managing the overall operations and resources of the company. He's a graduate of Texas A&M University and holds a Bachelor of Business Administration. He serves on the board of directors of the Liberty Christian School and works with multiple charities and nonprofit organizations around the Metroplex. And John enjoys golfing, hunting, and spending time with his wife and children. So appreciate it, John. I'll turn it over to you. Why don't you give your little spiel, and we'll keep going.
Thank you, Randy. It's great to be with you guys today. I won't read what he just read there, but again, I'm John Spittler with the Encompass Group. So we deliver, as Randy was talking about, a complete human capital management solution. So if it touches HR or your employees, we probably have a piece of that we work with. Our client sizes range anywhere from about 100 employees on up to about 5,000 employees. A big piece of what we are consulting on these days, working with our clients on these days, is that pre-employment part of human capital management. So identifying and attracting top talent, putting together what I'll call a well-balanced talent strategy. And so I thought today, after talking to Randy and the group here prior to the meeting, that I would walk you through maybe what it looks like and what we share with our customers about having a well-balanced approach to tackling this gap that Steve was showing us as far as open job or job opportunities and the number of people available to fill them. And so we work with people to help develop a story to really sharpen their strategy and make them more impactful and more effective in identifying and attracting top talent. So with that, I'm a bit of a storyteller, and Steve did great with the numbers and stuff, but I'm gonna take a different direction with this. So what I would like to share is essentially feeding your organization with top talent. There's not one specific way, I think, to go about doing that and being effective with that. So today, to create a well-balanced strategy, I've put together a couple categories here, and I'm calling it fishing, hunting, and farming. So just bear with me. I think it'll make sense in the end. So fishing, I had the opportunity to go fly fishing on this beautiful river in Colorado not long ago. And the conditions were perfect. It was a beautiful day, gorgeous stream. I'm out there fly fishing. I'm working the rod, right? I've got my action going. I'm getting the fly right where I think I want it. But I'm not really catching much. And I look over to the left, and down the stream walks this local old timer. And man, he's doing the same thing, but it seems like every time he casts, he is getting a strike. And so finally, after watching him catch 2 fish within 50 yards of me, I walked over and I said, "Hey, what's the secret?" And he told me, "So what are you fishing with?" And so I showed him the fly, and he said, "Well, you need to switch to this color today. This is what they're hitting." Like, wow, okay. Sure enough, I changed out the fly, cast out, and I bet it wasn't 5 minutes, and I had a beautiful brown. And so I compare that, I share that story to tell you that I think part of your talent strategy is fishing, right? And when we're going to go out fishing, I would make the comparison of the bait. And this is where we would consult with clients on building and presenting effective job descriptions. Maybe it's developing a compensation analysis where you can make sure that you're still competitive. Potentially, it's helping communicate effectively why somebody would want to come and work for you. But really separating yourself and making yourself unique and really effectively working with the right bait a lot of times can change the results of what you're seeing in the market. The next thing I would say is cast and test in multiple waters. That guy was not fishing the same spot. I bet he walked miles that day cruising down the stream. And so I would make the comparison here to whatever your organization's, pre-employment, whether that's applicant tracking solution that you have, maybe it's your careers page, but ultimately when you are out there posting a job and you're looking to identify and attract the talent that you need, making sure that that job posting is going out to as many places as possible. And so having technology to handle that for you, I think is also an effective approach for that, whether that be sending it to Indeed and LinkedIn, maybe it's some subscription-based platforms that you might work with like Monster or Career Builder, maybe it's social media. But making sure that you're casting and fishing in a lot of different places. My dad always said you catch more fish with more hooks in the water. So fishing has to be a key component of what you are doing to identify talent and bring them into your organization. However, as we all know, if you've been fishing, I guarantee you it's called fishing, not catching. And you've been out there, maybe all the conditions are right, you got the right bait, beautiful weather, whatever the case may be, and for whatever reason, they're just not biting. And that's because this is, it's passive. We can't control what bites. We can't control who responds to our job posting. And I will tell you that for the most part, the trophy fish, that marlin, did not wake up today and go search a job board. They got up and went to work like you did. It's because they're engaged, they're happy, they're building their career and they're working diligently towards that. And so that's what leads us to hunting. And so we're coming into hunting season. It's my favorite time of year. I'm a big hunter. I love going hunting for elk. I've got a bull here on screen for you, but I enjoy going hunting in Colorado. I've got a great little place that I've been to for years. And so when I get ready to go hunting, I get all my gear together. I have everything lined out. I've got to make sure I've got just the right stuff. And then I'm going to go. Now, I will tell you that I've tried hunting independently by myself. I feel like I'm pretty good at it. But when you go to unfamiliar land and you're out there, your chances of your hunt are significantly decreased as opposed to when you hunt with a guide. And so a guide is somebody who knows where the town, where really the herd is moving, where they're feeding, where they're watering, right? They know the traffic patterns of what they're doing. And so they're able to get you on a quality herd faster. And so I will make the comparison here of employing guidance to a recruiting strategy, whether that's internal recruiting or external recruiting. You might have within your organization, you might have people who are responsible for recruiting, and that's what they do all day, every day. Maybe you don't have that. Maybe it's a part-time gig for them. Maybe you have outsourced to a third-party recruiting firm, an outsourced group. But these are people who all day, every day, this is what they do for a living. And so we work with clients to help build out what that story looks like, right? How do you target the right talent? How do you take that story to market and put it in front of them? And this gives you the opportunity to be more proactive, right? So now we're going out in the market, we're targeting exactly what we're looking for. Maybe it's a certain experience or background. Maybe it's a bull from a competitor, somebody who actually works in our industry. And so I feel like you have to complement the two between the passive fishing and just putting your hooks in the water to try and attract that way, as well as hunting and being more proactive and going out. And I put in here bigger meal. I don't know that this strategy is necessarily employable for lower level, what I'll call the fish, right? We catch a fish, feeds us for a day. You go shoot a bull and you've got food for a while, right? And so I feel like this is a tactic that you would employ on higher level positions, a little bit more difficult to fill, challenging roles. Maybe it's by location, job code, whatever the case may be. So fishing, hunting, I think both equally as important in developing a well-balanced talent strategy. And that brings me to farming. Next out of that. And so I'm glad I have this in here, especially for my new friend, Darren, who's in the potato business on screen with us here today. But farming, I think it yields the greatest result, right? You can take a small piece of land and you can produce a tremendous harvest. And I think a lot of times companies focus on fishing and hunting, or one or the other. And I think they neglect the concept of farming. And so before a farmer goes out and plants, right? He goes and inspects his soil. He's looking to enrich the soil, till the soil, prepare the soil so that he's ready. And so I would make the comparison of soil to pouring into your employees, right? Pouring in and checking your culture, making sure you have a healthy culture. It's something we consult with our clients on all the time. What is your culture? You also have to water effectively. And so watering effectively, I would compare that to professional development, right? Personal development. Maybe it's constant feedback. It's encouragement from your managers. And so watering effectively to ensure that ultimately what happens is that plant grows up and produces its own seed. And so if you're doing this effectively with your internal staff, you're reducing turnover. We're talking about the Great Resignation. Ultimately, what you're after is a self-sustaining ecosystem of top talent, because people like that, they want to work with other people like them. And so making sure you have a dynamic culture, making sure you have consistent feedback, making sure that your employees are connected is the easiest job to fill. It's the one you don't lose the individual on and have to backfill. Last but not least, I feel like walking your fields. I think people think about farming, we think planting, we understand watering, but then we think we're done and we just wait. And the reality of it is a good farmer, he inspects his field. He inspects the crop. And so I would compare this to surveying your employee population. We're looking for engagement. We're looking for satisfaction. And so inspecting your fields. And I will tell you, people will tell you there's no silver bullet, there's no magic formula. And ironically, a group came up after doing surveys of tens of thousands of employees, and they've developed what they call the magic formula. So this is essentially the top 5 results as to why employees said they stay in their job or stay within an organization. And as you can see the acronym for MAGIC here, the first one being meaning. Does the position that I hold have meaning? Do I feel like I have meaning? Autonomy. Do I have some freedom and flexibility in what I'm doing, especially in the virtual world today? Giving an employee autonomy is becoming more and more and more important. Growth, whether that's professional growth, personal growth, growth within the organization. Impact. Am I having impact? And I'll be honest with you, sometimes It's as simple as you going and communicating to your employee population the impact that you see them having. And then finally, connection. Do I feel connected to my coworkers? Do I feel connected to my boss? Do I feel connected to the company? Do I feel connected to the services or the solution or the product that we manufacture? When you have a healthy environment, it is really difficult to uproot those strong roots. And so I will tell you, just like having a well-balanced meal like you see here, organizations have to focus on having a well-balanced talent strategy, especially in this market. We talk about unemployment. We talk about really how we're going to go about finding people for these roles. And I've heard, companies say, we're just not going to grow. We're just going to stay where we are because we can't find what we're looking for. And I'm telling you, it's a perfect opportunity, especially for people in your role, to step back and take a more global perspective and look at your overall talent strategy. Look at how you're fishing. Look at your bait. Look at how you're hunting. Look and see if it's even effective. And really and truly making sure you're inspecting your own environment, your own soil, your own crop, because that can be your greatest recruiting group ever within your own employee population. So I hope that makes sense. I'm happy to answer any questions. If there's ever anything we can do for you, please don't hesitate to connect.
John, that's good stuff. And I think that's so important, all that stuff. What do you think the time frame is to try to implement a program like this? I mean, there's a lot of thought that goes into this. And I mean, you think you can get something like this up off the ground in 3 months, 2 months? What's your just takeaway on that?
Yeah, I would tell you that there are some things, and it's just like anything else. There are some things that you can fix quickly. There's low-hanging fruit in every organization. I think it's more of a phased approach. So it's really understanding what your strategy is. And honestly, we work with some groups that they don't even have a strategy. They're just doing what they've always done and what they know to do. And they're seeing the challenges of that. I'll be honest with you. I talked to a group not far from where I'm sitting right now, and their strategy is they put a big banner across their building that says "Help Wanted." And that's a very limited catch that you're going to get. And so again, I would tell you that from a time frame perspective, you need to devote time to developing a strategic strategy about how you're going to approach your talent, about how you're going to approach your culture, about how you're going to approach your growth. And then I would begin to execute on those things simultaneously.
Great. One question, then we got to get on to Trey. From Josh Stan, what are some tips on staying connected in a remote work environment? What's your thoughts on that?
That's a great one. So I'll tell you, I mean, we're doing it right now, right? I think the challenge that companies face is not everybody is super tech savvy, but here we are, we're all online. And I'll be honest with you, I feel like if you could chart that curve is really going off the chart at this point. But I mean, you can FaceTime with anybody just about at this point. But I think the challenge that companies face is they get enough remote employees and managers feel like they don't have the time to do something like this right here and stay connected. And so it's a little bit of out of sight, out of mind. And that's where that connection begins to break down, right? So I would say it's being more intentional about some of that FaceTime, even if the FaceTime is screen time. Maybe it's a note of encouragement. It's a touch base, again, that constant communication. That way they feel like, hey, I'm still part of the group. I haven't been forgotten. And I think, again, it's usually a time thing. People feel, just burned out and they don't have the bandwidth to reach out to all those people. But I think it's critically important, because if not, what you'll find is a downward spiral of people beginning to leave, and all you're doing is compounding the problem that we face already.
Great question. And and Tom, I haven't forgot about your questions. You've got a couple questions. I'm going to wait to the end for you, but it's good to see you're on here. We need to get to Trey to make sure we have a little bit of time at the end. So I'm going to move on to Trey and introduce Trey. I want to read his bio. And it's an interesting polling question, by the way, that just came up, is your company experiencing workforce shortage? And boy, outrageous. I mean, almost everybody is, which we'd expect, but that's a good polling question. All right, let me introduce Troy. Troy is the Director of Human Resource at Encore Wire Corporation, where his primary roles are to provide oversight to the human resources, safety, and training and development departments. Troy's daily efforts are spent supporting and sustaining the Encore culture, creating and planning new corporate initiatives, and cutting company turnover and cost. Troy has previously led 4 other departments, including production, quality control, R&D, and sales in his 11-year tenure at Encore. Troy credits his career achievements to Encore's culture, his executive team's mentorship, and the team of high morale coworkers around him who work in a partnership to do the right thing each day. I'll get through this. Can't read today. Skidmore earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Organizational Leadership and Supervision at Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana. In 2009, he resides in McKinney with his wife, daughter, and 2 dogs. He enjoys spending time with family and friends, staying active in church, and working out and serving the community. Great stuff. Trey, lead us through the last presentation, and then we'll go back to some Q&A from the chat room and to the panelists. So take it away, Troy.
Perfect. I'll get started here, pull up the presentation for you guys. So I appreciate being here, first of all. Frank Bilbin is the one who got me to come. He's been talking about FEI for a long time, and I've got a lot of history and some stories in the back of my mind about the group, and it's just an honor to be here in front of you all. I think going through this, we've heard from an economic standpoint, we've heard kind of 10,000 foot view, and my piece of this coming from manufacturing and the HR side, it's going to get a little bit more in the details of what happened over the last 2 years here at Encore. Maybe this story is going to be very similar to your own. Maybe it's a little bit different, but that's the story I know, and that's where we're coming from. And I'll try to stay to 5 minutes real quick, and then get on to any questions that we have. So the first thing I want to do is give a little bit of background about Encore, size, who we are, what we do. So we are a manufacturer of electrical wire and cable. We're the second largest in the US, but we are the largest in our category, which is building wire. Building wire is any wire that you find inside the walls, ceiling, floor of any building you're in. So we're in data centers, homes, Cowboys Stadium, your local CVS, school, church, anything where you have a light switch to a light or a power going to a motor or drive, that's what we manufacture. And that's our core products. So you can see from the slide here, we've had a long growth here in McKinney, Texas. We have 1 location, and it is this location in McKinney, Texas. We started in 1989 with 68,000 square feet. And you can see from the picture here, we have close to almost just shy of 3 million feet under roof today. We have 1,450 employees-ish today. And last year, to talk about finances, we did 1.2 billion in sales. This year, we've done that in the first 2 quarters. So I'll let you guys figure out what our trajectory is for the year. We are rapidly growing. We have a lot going on. We are publicly traded on NASDAQ under wire. So you can look up anything about us publicly, about our history, about our trajectory of growth, and maybe even check out our stock if you're so inclined. Talking through some of the stuff about the topic today, the Great Resignation. So I'm going to go through 4 of these slides. 2 of them are for 2020 and 2 of them are for 2021. They're going to look a little shallow. I've had to remove some of the tiny details as we are publicly traded. So this is what we're looking at right now. What we're looking at is our head count. And so if we go back to January 2020, y'all can see our head count was just shy of 1,400. And so we were clipping along. We were in the middle of building a service center, which we moved into this year, just getting the ground broken on that. And as we come in, you start seeing these events listed across the bottom. For us, January through February, we knew we didn't really know what COVID was, but we knew it was out there. It was kind of across the pond at the time. And, there was some worry. And there was also a lot of people thinking, what is this thing? It's not really real. It's not in our face. For us in the manufacturing space, especially with us delivering our products to a lot of job sites or distributors who support job sites across the country, we weren't seeing a major impact on business until March 11th when the NBA shut down. I don't know if anybody else remembers that, but that is clear in my mind, because when the NBA shut down over the next week, about every Fortune 500 company in the US started shutting down and sending people home. And when you work at a company that at the time had roughly 1,350 employees and 1,100 of them are hourly running machines, you can't send home 85% of your staff, right? And so what are we going to do? And over the next month, we watched as construction sites, job sites, governors started shutting things down and saying, hey, some of these places you're shipping to have to go home. So we did the approach of, we don't want to be the first to lead as a business in making these decisions around COVID, but we definitely don't want to also be the last, right? And so we were kind of trying to be in the middle of the pack of how we were going to attack this COVID thing. So as we go, you can see our head counts coming down. And why is that? We had no idea, with job sites shutting down, who were using our wire, installing it, what we were going to be selling over the next few months. I think everybody can remember back in forecasts, we're all over the place. And so we did not hire anybody, but we had no layoffs here at Encore. We just kind of let natural attrition take course. And most of the people that were leaving, to be honest, a lot of them were scared about COVID and what was going to happen. And so we didn't replace those because we didn't know if we had the work coming in to be able to replace those. I'm going to pop over to the other slide real quick and we'll jump back here in a second. This is running congruent here, the same timeline. You can see the overtime and the turnover. The two funny things that are happening here, January, February, we are ramping up. We're making more wire. We're selling wire. The economy is doing good for us at the moment. And our biggest thing when you make wire and cable is you can sell wire and cable on three things: pricing, delivery, and quality, right? We focus on delivery and quality. And so our pricing is a little bit more than our competitors, but we are the fastest to get it there. So we were having good growth, good overtime. And then when COVID hit, you'll see we pulled back the overtime. We kept everybody full time through that time, but we weren't working excessive amounts of overtime. What we were doing, we were filling up our warehouse with what we were running because we knew at some point you got to go back to building. So we're building inventory. And then at the same time, we are fixing machines that have a weird noise going on, right? If a motor belt sounds like it's wearing out, let's fix it now before it's going to be full on force back at the job site. We're painting things, we're cleaning things. So as you see, we kind of go through a little dip here, and coming out in August when really businesses started returning back, we start picking up overtime. That's because we're shipping more product. Job sites are opening back up, construction's getting back to normal, cases are a little bit lower at the time. And so we start picking up our overtime there because we're making more wire. And the reason we're making so much at the time is because we have a full inventory and we have machines that are now fixed, ready to go, and we are delivering quicker than anybody, any of our competitors. You'll see this copper colored line is turnover. The other effect of COVID that we saw last year, and this copper colored line is almost exactly if I was to put on TRIR, which is a safety metric, people going to the doctor, any of that, all of it came down. And why is that? People were worried. If I lose my job right now, who's going to take care of me? Or can I find another job? Are there other companies out there that are hiring? I heard about my neighbor who was sent home for 3 weeks. I don't want that to happen to me. I don't want to go to his company, right? There's different things that were happening where people were getting, seeing indications, writing on the wall of, I better stay put. Encore's taking care of me. We're coming out of this. I'm going to stay where I'm at. That was short-lived, right? So as the economy starts coming back, we have to adjust. And I'm going to go to the second slide here for 2021. You can see our turnover is creeping back up. All other businesses, other sectors, or other manufacturers that are in our area, they're starting to get a lot of orders, right? The economy is coming back. Let me get this out of the way here. I don't know if y'all can see that box. But as that's coming back, they need employees. And so we are losing employees. We're having employees turnover because there's options out there for them. The overtime, we are working more. Our second quarter, if you want to check it out, was nice to summarize it. But we are working a lot of overtime. The big spike here in May is we did open our service center. It came online, so we had a lot of overtime to fill it up. And then in June, we actually realized the main driver for people leaving was the hours we were working. So we have implemented some 8-hour shifts opposed to our traditional 12-hour shifts. We had to get something to mix up the options for our employees. The biggest driver, I would say, the biggest difference for our employees during the time of COVID and going home or having less hours here, people started adjusting their life to that, right? So your hourly employees that were running, let's say 60 to 70 hours a week on average. Joe, he works 60 hours a week for 5, 10, 15 years that he's been here at Encore. We're cutting him down to 40, 42, 48 max hours during the COVID months. His wife gets real used to Joe being home on the weekends. His kids like Joe coming to the games, or they're going on walks every night. Any of that stuff that happened, if we all remember back to that, Joe starts realizing there's another life, right? That if I'm working less, I can enjoy a little bit. And I think that's where a lot of our employees or a lot of the market is at. They want to have that work-life balance that they experience for 3 to 6 months, depending on the industry. But they also need to make money, right? And so they're finding ways to work less hours and make more. And as employers, we are pumping out higher wages so that they're able to do that, right? We're trying to do sign-on bonuses. We're trying to do different things to get them in here. And what that's allowing is for them to be able to still be at that income level they were at before, but work less hours. And that's where we're seeing. So the big resignation means a few things to me. It means, yes, there are people that are leaving, going and doing different industries. Trucking's a big one for us that we're seeing people leave into. There's also people that are starting their own companies, being their own boss. This economy where we're at right now with housing going on, we've got people leaving and starting roofing companies. The North Texas area, if you want to start something, it's great for these guys that are hands-on, guys to go out there and start their own thing. On top of that, though, we're seeing competition on the salary side as well. So on the salary side, we're seeing what we used to go to market and need an IT programmer. We'd have to go find somebody in the Metroplex because they're coming into the office 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, and we'd have to compete with other companies in the Metroplex. Now that a lot of these jobs, whether it's accounting, credit department, IT, any of that that's outsourced or work from home, there's a lot of those people that now can find a job at a California-based company, and now they can work it from home and have that job. So we're now competing on a national level with other companies that are out there, which is creating us having to pay more money or implement some of these other work schedules, to accommodate what they're wanting. This slide here, just so you guys know, our headcount is trending up. We're opening a new manufacturing plant. There's a few things that have happened here, with Texas helping with I think we had mentioned it before, with the unemployment, stopping that. You can see how that moved the curve for us upwards of people now needing to go back to work because they're not getting as much unemployment. So we had a lot more applications during that time. Another one for us is that, as we're building this plant, we're having to hire more people because as we get into the 30, 60, 90 days, we're seeing people find those job applications they put on, since it's so easy to apply these days. 30 days into a job, the other recruiters are calling, they're finding other schedules, shifts, things like that. So we are over hiring where we can at the moment to be able to accommodate that. We might lose a few before we get past that 90-day mark and they're actually making wire for us. That's the slides I have. I know, Randy, you've got some questions, and I'm ready to answer any that are coming in.
Yeah, awesome stuff, Troy. And one question I guess for you is, I know you've got turnover. What's usually the reason the employees give? Is it the competitor hiring them away? Is it the work-life balance? What's usually the reason they give?
100%. So what it's always been, and it's no call, no show is number one, right? We don't get to interact with the employees, but when we do get to interact with the employees, what used to be, money or things like that, it's now more about schedule. It's the time. It's the, I can't plan my weekend, or I've found another position that has days, or I found another position that I can work 48 instead of 60. So it's really the work-life balance for us. And, I think in manufacturing, the great resignation to me has been happening the whole time I've been in HR. This topic of millennials, if you all remember the last few years, we're talking about, we've got all these people that are aging out of the industry, and no young people like millennials are coming into manufacturing. They're not going into the trades, anything like that. So the great resignation topic has been happening for a while. What COVID done is compounded where the people that are in manufacturing get a taste of more work-life balance, get a taste of maybe a different side job, and that they're taking that, instead of staying in the traditional manufacturing schedule, if that makes sense.
So are you trying to save some of these people? I mean, if they're giving you the opportunity to, hey, here's my resignation, are you trying to save them, give them more money, or?
Yeah, 100%. It's a full court press. When they turn that in, unless they're just walking out the back door. I mean, our biggest thing for recruiting, there's a few things that we've done to get the traffic you're seeing in our head count. But the biggest thing that we're focusing on right now is closing the back door. We can get people in right now by throwing money out there, doing different programs that we're doing, fishing, hunting, all those different things, farming. But really, if you're not doing the farming piece and keeping who you have growing, then the back door is going to be open. And that is the real problem today. And so anytime that we do hear somebody's rolling over, we have an exit interview process. We have an HR person, a training person, their supervisor, all in a room. And we're going, what is it going to take? What do you need? We can accommodate. The nice thing for us here at Encore is we have 7 manufacturing plants. We have a warehouse. We have a rod mill. We can find a new setting or a new shift schedule that might work for them. And so we can move people around as needed for their accommodations. And that's what we've been doing a lot of.
Troy, have you had to increase your wages for most positions, or
Yeah.
you're probably not at minimum wage, I would guess, right?
No. I won't go through what they are, but I'll tell you, all of our labor sheets, so our pay scales for each position, we're crawling those up a whole $1 this year. So the low end is going up $1 and the high end's going up $1. We just did $1.50 last year. And so we're up $2.50 on starting wage in a lot of our hourly positions. If you go to the skilled market, your control techs, your welders, your electricians, it's almost $3 that we're moving this year on average. So, we're having to get competitive out there in the marketplace to get people in here. But, not having the line running is costing more than moving that wage, right? So we have to be able to do that.
That's good. I want to try to get to some of these other questions I skipped over to the other panelists, and please put in your questions if you got something for these guys. We're nearing the end of this thing. So here's a question from Tom to, I think, Steve. Can you comment on the residential housing market in DFW and what that's doing?
Sure. Obviously, the big thing here the last 5 years is all the in-migration. The last 15 years, Frisco High School, one high school going to 8 and having their own UIL district. But all that growth really seems to have peaked on the pricing side in June. What we're hearing, what we're seeing on the ground, and the mortgage activity. Of course, we're one of the largest mortgage warehouse operations in the country, and you think about Rocket Mortgage and a lot of these other places that are branded mortgage brokers. We're the lender behind that, and so we're definitely seeing a cooling of activity. We saw it before rates started rising in the middle of the third quarter. It's not purely an interest rate thing. It's the prices got high enough that they're just discouraging people from even trying. Now, the real driver is public policy. This may not be very popular for people to hear, but coming out of 2009, Dodd-Frank put enough dampers in terms of regulations and difficulties. We also have a very big home builder, very big home builder practice that's national. There's enough dampers in the home building industry that we're chronically undersupplied in housing, not just Texas, but nationally. And so we're getting the brunt of it here because of in-migration from other states. That puts a floor under our housing prices. But remember, the other floor and a very strong foundation to our housing prices is this decade-long undersupply of housing. So we're talking about millennials aggressively accelerating their formation of households now as they come into their childbearing years, as they come into their more productive payroll years, as they're hitting their 30s. And I can tell you, it is going to be a consistent theme. You're not going to see a reversal or any kind of big reversal in prices anytime soon. If you were thinking about buying a house, you're just going to have to hold your nose and fight your way in there. It's not the frothiness that we saw April to July. That's over. That's peaked and rolled over. But is there a consistent demand? You bet. One of the things you talk about labor, and you think about the price of labor and hourly wages going up. What about the in-migration that the current administration is doing from the southern border? Again, you're talking about people that just don't have the skills. So we don't see that as a net benefit to the economy, and we're not pricing any kind of adjustment, if you will, in any of our thought process to the labor shortage with that issue.
It's interesting. I'm not sure if you saw that question, but there was a question right on that point. So I appreciate you talking about that. Let me read this other one from Robert Morris and let it may be to Steve, but whoever wants to answer it. The Wall Street Journal reported on 10/15 that 2021 resignations were up 62% over 2020, but up only 12% over 2019. So the question is this just media hype, or is this normalized? What do you think from those statistics?
Yeah, I don't know, and I find that a little hard to comprehend and make the algebra work in my head, because did 29 see a surge in quits? Yes, you can see it in the stats. The quit rate went up sequentially year over year that year. Anything approaching this year? Heck no. So this is unprecedented in many ways. But what I leave you with lists. Labor, inflation, the supply chains. Texas doing better. But I also want to point out real quick that this whole thing with the quit rate, supply chains, everything, all these were trends that started well before the pandemic, especially supply chains. That ended with the Cold War. When the Berlin Wall came down, that's when that 50-year global trade cycle started to turn, and we're just kind of in the third inning of it. Same thing with inflation. All these other things are happening primarily because of debt and demographics. So the pandemic, just like the 18-19, just like the 58-59 flu, it's just an accelerant.
One question I think this is to John. I mean, what's the DFW footprint of Encompass? Can you kind of talk through? You guys are regional, nationwide.
Yeah, we're headquartered in Dallas. We have, the solution itself, we're pretty much industry agnostic. Everybody's in the HR space. It doesn't matter whether you want to be or not. By law, you're required to do a lot of the things that we work with. And so starting here in Dallas, obviously a large concentration of clients are here in the DFW area, but through expansion, through them having offices elsewhere, we've had the opportunity to expand really across the US.
Is Texas better, experiencing worse, better, this regular resignation, or what's your take on that?
I would tell you Dallas, somebody showed a graph, I think it was Steve, who showed Austin having tremendous growth, Dallas having tremendous growth, Houston. Texas is very fortunate. We have so many good things going for us. The reason I think we're faring a little bit better is because people are relocating here. You're not just having an increase in jobs, you're having an increase in population. And so by default, it gives you a little bit more of an advantage, or maybe to say advantage is a little bit of a strong word, but less of a challenge than the places where people are maybe having mass exodus. And so I think Texas is faring great. We love doing business in Texas. I can tell you this, there's a lot of states that they're just not employer friendly. They're making it harder than it ought to be for some of these companies and some of these employees and some of these. So because Texas is doing it, I believe one of the best ways, I think we are faring better as a result.
Great. Well, we're right at 6:06. We're over our time. Is there any more questions that I think that's all I've answered pretty much most of them in the thing, unless I missed them. Please shoot me a quick one. But any final comments from you guys? And I think anybody else, then I think we'll probably be at the end here. But great discussion. Okay.
Nothing in your chat box, Randy?
I think that's it. So I think we're good.
Perfect. Well, Steve, John, Troy, thank you so much for being our panelists for this presentation. Randy, thank you, of course, for being the moderator. And thank you all for joining us today to learn more about the Great Resignation and the workforce shortage. Be on the lookout. Our next Dallas Manufacturing Distribution SIG event will be on January 19th. The topic is still to be determined. Our steering committee and sponsors are working diligently to find the next great topic. So be on the lookout for an invitation there. But in the meantime, everybody stay safe and we'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
See you around town.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.